What's going on, boys? It is day number 24 of reading through the book of Deuteronomy. We are going to be looking at some more of the miscellaneous laws that we started off on yesterday, and we will actually be continuing them into tomorrow's reading as well. So for today, I have a couple of things I want to break down real quick. Three things that really spoke out to me as far as, things that, I can apply to my life, and, things that are pretty common in today's world. And it's not to say that nothing else mentioned in here isn't good, but there's a lot of things that are mentioned that, to me, I do understand, but there's, I think things that apply to people who are later on in life, where, like, for instance, it talks about, in the beginning of chapter 24, about marriages, about how, if a man is displeased with, his wife, about these divorces, and how a man, if he marries, if he's a newly married man, that he's not to be sent off to war or anything, and basically saying that, and he continues on with saying that, that if someone's caught kidnapping, that they need to be put on trial. But the first thing that really kind of grabbed my attention was really this word loan. And I want to read this little set of verses to kind of clarify what's going on here. Verses 10 through 13, if you want to read along with me. It says, "When you make a loan of any kind to your neighbor, do not go into their house to get what is offered to you as a pledge. Stay outside and let your neighbor to whom you are making the loan bring the pledge out to you. If your neighbor is poor, do not go to sleep with their pledge in your possession. Return the cloak by sunset so that your neighbor may sleep in it. Then they will thank you. And then it will be regarded as a righteous act in the sight of the Lord your God." So this word loan, I'm pretty sure all of us have probably heard this loan. For people who are watching who are in college right now, I'm sure you guys probably know exactly what I'm talking about with this word loan. So loan is a particular, I wouldn't say law, but it's like a particular thing that can come into your life that basically says, hey, we'll give you this money to cover your expenses or to help you out for a period of time, but then after a while you have to pay that back. So in other words, this doesn't just have to be money. This can be as simple as real labor, someone who's working, or if you say, hey, like, if you come and do these things to my house, if you clean my house or you do these things, and I'll pay you back with giving you some things of my harvest. Like when I have my harvest, I'll give you some of the fruits and vegetables and the crops and stuff like that. But I think, another way of looking at it, as like I said, for the college students, when you get admitted to college, one of the biggest things that comes up is tuition. Tuition is a big part, and the money amount kind of just it ranges depending on where you go. If you're in state, out of state, there's all sorts of different factors to it. So for like me, for example, like, this year I had to register for classes and figure out what my balance was going to be. And once that balance came up, I was like, all right, I said, I have these loans that are going to get applied to my tuition. And basically what a loan does is, if you have enough, and it's loans and scholarships, they're all kind of in the same kind of, box together, but they are separate. The scholarships are a whole different thing. But a loan is basically for college anyway, is a set of money that comes from, this can be a certain company or for the government, and they say, hey, we'll give you this amount to cover your tuition, but you'll have to pay it back over a period of time. So this can be a few months, a few years, and it always comes back with saying, all right, so we'll pay for this. And it basically says, like, hey, you will pay this off for you, so you don't have to stress out about this money or this excess tax. And as long as you work hard, you should be able to pay it back. And other ways, like work opportunity. There's plenty of work opportunities that I know that I've, heard people have, to where they have worked for a certain company that has paid back their loan and their debt that they had to use. So, and again, this is positive for college students, but for those who are not college students, just kind of understand where I'm coming from. It's like saying, hey, I need to go borrow my neighbor's, I don't know, like a certain pan for cooking, or I need to borrow a piece of lawn equipment. If that neighbor is like, hey, like, you can use it, but, hey, just make sure you return it. So basically what this verse is saying is, it's okay to borrow. It's okay to say, look, I don't have this particular piece in my life. Can I borrow it? And I think that's okay. But at the same time, it's not okay for you basically just to go into someone else's house and take it, because that would be stealing. So in other words, say, hey, you go up to your neighbor, say, hey, I need some help. Let them give you what they have, and then take that from there and just repay it back over time. That's basically what it is talking about with a loan here. So that was one of the things that stood out to me, and it really made kind of open my eyes a little bit with just with college and loans and stuff like that. But anyway, I'll hop off that topic. So there's two other things that I wanted to kind of talk about real quick. One of them is verse 16, which is kind of interesting. It says, "Parents are not to be put to death for their children, nor children be put to death for their parents. Each will die for their own sin." So we all come from different households. We all have our own ways of being raised. We all have our different opinions about people in our lives. But basically what is kind of being said here is that you are responsible for your own actions. Every decision that you make, everything that you do comes from your own self. If you were to say, well, so-and-so made me do that. Well, you may think that, but ultimately the things that you do are from a decision that you make in your mind and kind of flows through your heart at the same time. And I think one of the things we can take away from this is that we must trust God for our family. So if you know somebody, like, if you are at the point in your life where your kids are, not, obeying what you're telling them to do, that's not to say that you're a bad parent. It's just to say that, maybe they're being influenced by something else and that needs to be addressed. Or let's say it's vice versa, and you're the child and, your parents are not really supporting your life. That's not your fault. That's just, the ways people are sometimes. And I think the best thing we can do about it is to break away from that situation and understand that, sometimes it needs to just be us and God. God is the only one who can change people's hearts. It's not our job. We can encourage and motivate, but it's not always going to work. There's plenty of people in my life that I wish that I could change their hearts about how they might feel about me, how they feel about other people. But ultimately, I can't do that. I can say what I want, do what I want, but at the end of the day, we are all human. We have free will. We have the choice to do whatever we want. It is God's job to change our hearts. And I just pray that, if you're in that situation, that you would reach out and pray to God and say, look, I'm trying to do what I can. You're praying for that particular person, and it's not going the way you want it to, and you're just like, God, I really want this person to be changed. And if it doesn't work out, then, well, maybe it's just not meant to be. But I can assure you that if the person is not changing after you tried multiple times, that's not your fault. You're doing what you can, and that's all that matters. And that's what God looks for. God looks for hard work. And that's, I feel like, where he will step in after a period of time and say, all right, now it's my turn to take over. And then this last thing kind of stood out to me was literally the next set of verses later, verses 17 through 18, which says, "Do not deprive the foreigner or the fatherless of justice, or take the cloak of the widow as pledge. Remember that you were slaves in Egypt, and the Lord your God redeemed you from there. That is why I command you to do this." So we must not discriminate based off of someone's lifestyle. Remember what God did for us. He made Moses saying, like, look, remember what God did for you in Egypt. You were slaves. You were held captive. You had forced labor. Like, now that you're free and you have come so far, don't discriminate just because someone is of lower class than you. Don't discriminate just because someone does something different than you or looks different than you. Don't discriminate. Don't discriminate. Because they are just as much value as you are. And I think that's one of the great things about, the modern day, is that we have the opportunity to live in a country that we get to experience the freedom. I know that a lot of people may not see that in ways that others do, but ultimately we have to understand that regardless of who you are, male, female, black, white, does not matter. We are all children of God, all of us. Every single person that you ever see in your life, every single person that has ever existed, currently exists, or will exist, is a child of God. Some people may not believe that because they think, well, what about people who are just, far from God, who curse God? No. Every single human that ever exists is a child of God. Every single one. So someone ever tells you that, oh, you can't be a child of God because you're this, because you live this way, or you look this way, or because you dress that way. No. And just remember that the heart is what our ultimate core of our life is. When someone says to follow your heart, you gotta be careful with that. Gotta be careful with that, because your heart can be easily influenced by your mind, and your mind is influenced by the ways of this world. So, they always say put your money where your mouth is, but you gotta be careful. You gotta take risks in life, but sometimes you gotta just address the problems and understand that life's hard, and it's not meant to be easy. I wish that it was. I really wish, but it's not. You have to take risks, do things new, and that's where my encouragement is for you all today. We're going to finish off with today's daily prayer. We are on August 25th. Today's title is called Priority to Serve. We are looking in 1 Peter chapter 14, verse 10, which says, God has given each of you a gift from his great variety of spiritual gifts. Use them well to serve one another. Lord, you know my heart. I want to serve others, but I get too busy to doing things in this life that don't matter. Place me in a priority to love and serve others. I want my life to mean something, not because of my achievements, but because I actually show kindness to those in need. Give me your eyes to see the world as you do. There are many broken hearts out there, people hurting and no one to love them. Give me a heart for the lonely so I can share them with you. So through the kindness and righteousness of our hearts, we can reach people in so many ways. We can reveal to them who they were meant to be. And sometimes it is a very tough project. I myself am, at the point in life where I feel that I can be, of service. I can serve and help people. I definitely think that I can better myself in loving others and just being present. I think, just showing up is the best thing that you can do. But it's that next step of serving and helping out and being the hands and feet of Jesus. And that is where we will finish off today. I hope you guys have had a great Monday. Hope everybody had a great first day. If you had school today or if you're at work, hope you had a great day. I will see you guys tomorrow. Peace out, boys.